What is happening, people? Welcome back to the Scarfey Talks Premier League podcast. In this episode, we'll be reviewing Game Week 23 in the Premier League, providing plenty of goals and entertainment, as always the Premier League does, and some surprise results in there, some expected results. We go through each and every game, discussing every team involved. 10 games, of course, and 20 teams, as always. And joining me, I've got an Arsenal fan, a West Ham fan, and a Tottenham fan. Mixed emotions amongst the panel. If we're being totally honest with you, we've got a winner on the panel, a draw on the panel, and also a defeat. So covering everything. So all the emotions literally here on the podcast. So let's introduce them one by one. Matt, I'm going to introduce you first because Arsenal are top of the table. Might not be feeling like that this week, we should get into, but how you been doing?
Do you know what? I'm not too bad. There was just so much overreaction from my fan base over the weekend, but I'm one of the ones that not calm, but just not overreaction. And look, we're still 4 points clear. We move on.
Fair enough. Good way of looking at it. Was it Lee Garner that called a 9.5 emergency stream, 9.5 hour? Is that right?
He does them literally every single game that we drop points.
But it's the
always
first
a
home
10-hour
defeat.
Stream or something.
Isn't it the first home defeat of the season? I swear it is.
It's our first home defeat of the season, and it's the first time in 3 years we've conceded 3 goals or more.
Don't think it calls for an emergency stream, but hey ho, whoever floats his boat. Thank you very much, Matt, for your time. Appreciate it as always. Cam, thank you very much for coming on. The Spurs fan, I mean, again, you're coming on discussing what is not a victory in the end and feels like a loss, even though it's not a draw against Burnley. But how are you doing, Cam?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. I mean, you've got Matt talking about how he's top of the league. We're talking about relegation at Tottenham right now. So both sides of North London, very, very different. But yeah, I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you, Cam. And someone that also knows the taste, not necessarily relegation, but being in a relegation battle, is Louis with West Ham, who, to be honest with you, could be overtaking Spurs if the form continues, both of West Ham and Tottenham. And that is not an understatement. That would have been a joke a couple of weeks ago, but West Ham has significantly gained on Tottenham. Was it like 10 points? And now it's only very few already between the two. So worrying stuff, indeed. It's gone down to single digits. But Louis, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I can see you're trying to do the old jinx tactic. I see through your plans, Harry. It's not going to work with Nuno Ball, but I'm doing well. Doing well today.
Good stuff. If you're listening on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. If you're listening by audio podcast platform, drop us a follow and a 5-star review. Don't worry, it is still me. I know I sound different. I am just coping with the flu at the moment, but I've said it before. I say it again. Painkillers are the best thing. So, yeah. Please do bear with me and bear with us, and we'll cover everything tonight for the Game Week 23 review, starting with West Ham and Sunderland. Of course, I'm going to start with you, Louis. So, back-to-back wins, which must feel nice. What were your thoughts on this game? Give us the rundown, because on paper, it looks like a significant result, but how did you think you also performed away from the result?
On paper, it was a good result, and in actuality, it was a good result. We are one of 3 teams in the Premier League in the moment to have won back-to-back games in our current turn of form. The other 2 are Chelsea and Man United, which explains how chaotic the Premier League is at the moment. It was a great game, all in honesty. In fact, it was probably the best football I've seen West Ham play in about 2 to 3 years. It was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. I almost thought for a second while sat in the stadium that I actually wasn't watching my own team because the football was that good. I've been used to watching dull, boring football for a long time now, and that was not it. It was mesmerising. We had great attacking play again. I thought against Spurs it might have been a fluke, and we were just, because it was a London derby, and we went a bit more attacking than normal. Against Sunderland, we hit them right off the bat. We got some goals, and obviously Fernandes scored an absolute worldie, screamer, thunderbolt, amazing goal. And everybody played well, and as you'd expect, coming into the second half, 3-0 up, you don't keep attacking in that position, especially Nuno with the way he plays. So it was very anticipated for us to go a bit more defensive, and despite it being a positive result, we still can't keep a clean sheet. I think it's an unwritten rule at this point. We haven't kept a clean sheet in 21 games. Last clean sheet was against Nuno, which shows how long ago it was. But that can't take away from the performance itself. It was excellent. It was much needed, because obviously West Ham fans will know that if you look at the results around us, they were not ideal for us this weekend. If anything, they were probably as bad as they could have been. But in the event that we hadn't won, the table and relegation situation would have been looking very bleak. But it was good. It gave us a lot of confidence. We've now got that confidence into the fans, into the side, into the players, the new signings. Everything looks like it's coming together, but it's a question of whether that will be enough considering the remaining games we have.
Okay, Louis, thank you very much. And of course, a fantastic strike from Mateus Fernandes for that third goal. I mean, that's one of the goals, well, it's going to be at least your one of goals of the season. That's a superb hit.
Unbelievable finish. I mean, he is a great player, and we knew that when we signed him. He had a lot of competition going for him, but we knew he'd be a great player. Some people thought the fee would have been a bit steep. Southampton were desperate to sell. He was desperate to go. We picked him up on a bit of a discount fee, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of clubs looking at him because he's putting in world-class performances each game. And he's been this heart to the midfield that we've really needed. Before he signed for us, a lot of people said our biggest problem was in the midfield. He seems to have gotten rid of everybody saying that comment. He's able to cover that much ground alone himself. He's just unbelievable. What a player.
Really good player. I know you've come on here before and spoken about him. And also Somerville, who scored once again. And you were speaking about, weren't you, how you needed that end product more from him. And, he delivered. Well, based on what you said, really, let's be honest. He delivered against Tottenham. He's delivered again in this game. He is linked, as I'm sure you'll know, for example, to Tottenham. It's weird. And we spoke about it, haven't we? How no business between the clubs since Scott Parker. And then all of a sudden, both, boards are in bed really with each other, whether it be Kinski, Hermansen, Somerville, Kudus, take your pick who it's going to be. But, the point is, I think Somerville is now playing really well, A, and B, he's getting that end product. Would you agree with that?
Of course, I definitely agree with that statement now, Harry, because we've always known that Somerville has had this skill. We know he's had this ability in him. He was always good at getting around the defenders, but it's just that final touch towards the end of the game. If it's getting into the box to maybe win a penalty, or is that final pass or getting onto the end of something? I mean, against Sunderland, he won a header. Now, Somerville's not the type to win a header, but he just launched himself at it because he's got that confidence within himself. He knows, hang on a minute, if I just nip in here, I might be able to get a header. And he's thumped it. He's quite literally thrown himself at the ball. And that is brilliant because he's got the confidence to do it. I think there's no surprise. Loads of clubs are looking at him. I know Roma were the team that recently offered for him, but we outright said no sale will be made this window. Obviously, if we are relegated, that would not come as a surprise for him to leave and go elsewhere. But people will remember, as I said, on the QPR when we played them in the FA Cup, on the review we did, I said that Somerville's goal, I hope, would be able to allow him to continue and carry on. And it turns out that it has done exactly that.
Spurs inquired about him as well, I believe.
They did.
Yeah. Obviously, it was rejected, but yeah.
Unsurprisingly, we said no. But I think if we are to go down, I suspect that there won't just be one or two clubs after him. We had Dortmund after him in the summer, and Nottingham Forest were also after him. So it goes to show why he's playing well under Nuno.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. If I come to you, Matt, and focus on Sunderland, who lost 3-1 in this game, and I've said it a few times before, I'll say it again, they're in a position now where they've got, kind of what I'd call comfort zone, right? They've got a nice cushion. They're not in really any danger at this moment in going down. To be exact, they're 13 points away from the drop. Anything is possible. Teams down the bottom are picking up a lot of points, but we're in a position now where, they lose a game or two here. It's going to be fine. So, what could Sunderland take from this going forward? Because it isn't a great result for them. West Ham played well and, last couple of games, a lot better form. But if, go back to Sunderland of just a few weeks ago, you wouldn't really seen this coming.
It's not a great result for them, but if you look over the course of this season, they've been dreadful away from home. What's been key for them in where they are in the league table is their home form. The home form is absolutely ridiculous for a team that's just come up to the Premier League, but their away form it's been very, very poor. So I wasn't surprised that this result happened, and also West Ham winning against Tottenham was sort of that advantage that West Ham had got because they got that boost and they were at home, and I felt that they were just going to be quite confident heading into this game. But I didn't expect West Ham to score 3 goals past a hard to beat Sunderland team. But they will look on that as a poor result. Personally, I think. I mean, they've got Burnley next week, so they should get the 3 points. But yeah, it's a poor result for them.
Absolutely not good at all. As we move on then to the next game, Fulham and Brighton, with Fulham winning this one 2-1. It was tight, and the game took twists and turns ultimately. And one point it looked like Brighton were going to win it, and then the end, of course, Fulham winning it. So, Cam, if I start with you, do you think Brighton will feel hard done by because the goal chalked off when would have meant they went 2-0 up? I mean, it looked like Brighton home and dry with 3 points. So, from a Brighton point of view, it looked like they played well, and I think they feel hard done by.
Yeah, I feel it was one of their good performances of the season. I think they could have definitely came here before the game and 100% have gotten 3 points. I think when you look at this game on paper, you can definitely see that it's a game between two, even teams, in my opinion. I think, whilst I think Fulham had chances to, definitely, or not Fulham, sorry, Brighton definitely had chances to win that game and get all 3 points. I think, it just wasn't their day for me. Although, they definitely weren't bad on the day. I just think, at the end of the day, I think Fulham just had more quality and considering they're at home as well, I think that definitely backed them to get the 3 points. I think Brighton can definitely, hold their heads high. I think, I know they didn't even get a point, out of that game, but I think they can look at the performance, after the game and be like, okay, yeah, we can definitely compete and, pretty much build on those type of performances, if you know what I mean. When they play Fulham again, or if they play Fulham again, they can definitely go into that game and, make up for it, if you know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I think when you look at Fulham and you see that they're home to a team like Brighton, you'd probably back them to an extent to win this type of game, albeit Brighton have definitely got some threat of their own. But I think, with Brighton being the away team, I just think, if they had just like a little bit more quality into their team, I think, they'll be winning these games with ease. But, at the end of the day, I think this is just a game that Fulham have won, and yeah, they've done well to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Louis, if I come to you, so, I talked about there, and I think it's important that, Fulham have ultimately turned this around because Brighton took the lead and they've won this game. Fulham so often, whether it be this season, last season, generally since Marcus Silva took over, I think he's done a good job. But the point is they, often in a winning position and they throw it away. So do you think for Fulham, it's, kind of nice to almost throw that back and go, actually, on this occasion, we're the team that's gone behind and we're going to turn it around rather than, throwing away a lead. We've actually come back from behind.
Yeah, I think the Fulham will take really big thing from this game, but I also think I liked about Fulham throughout this game was, despite Brighton maybe having, if you would like to say, maybe the bigger share of chances of more caliber and quality that could have gone in, I thought Fulham had a better mentality than Brighton at this game. Whether that was maybe because they were at home, I'm not too sure. But Brighton seemed weak. They know how to score goals, but they don't have this mentality to continue on. It felt like once they scored that goal, which was Danny Welbeck, which ended up being offside, it felt like that was it. It felt like that was the end of the game almost for them. They just lost their mentality. They'd been broken too many times. And obviously Fulham ended up winning the game through a brilliant free kick by Harry Wilson. But it just almost felt like Fulham were destined to win that game from that moment onwards. Brighton had lost so much confidence. And they have these smallest mistakes that cost them, whether that's a goalkeeping mistake or lack of concentration or something. These small things that people didn't consider as a worry at the beginning of, the season because it's just a start, have started to continue on for Brighton. And it's now getting quite worrying because they are losing out on a lot of points for them. They're losing out on a lot of points for their European fight or mid-table fight, whichever one you want to call it. And Fulham are excelling. They've got this mentality. You know, how many weeks ago was it we were talking about them maybe being involved in a relegation fight or middle to lower end of the league? And now they're up there fighting with Europe because they've been so consistent. They've had this mindset to keep digging deep and, you know, getting the most out of a tough situation. I think I'd put Fulham on par almost with Leeds, but they're doing it to a more efficient and better standard. So they just keep going in. I think it's brilliant.
I think that's well put. That's a really good example, actually. I appreciate that. And Louis, of course, I mean, what a goal from Harry Wilson, as Barney Fulham fan rightly says in the comments. I think Percy, the goalkeeper, maybe should do a tiny bit better, but take nothing away from Harry Wilson.
No, nothing away from him at all. The strike is brilliant, and I would like to say that I think Mark McBrugan is having a few too many issues this season, and that needs to be ironed out for sake of his game and Brighton's game. But that obviously isn't to take away from the amazing finish.
100%. Cam, did you want to add something on Harry Wilson? Of course, spectacular goal, and he's playing really well for Fulham at the minute. A lot of goals, a lot of good performances.
Yeah, I think when you have players in that kind of form who have been doing really well recently, I think, with the quality that he has and the fact that I think this is definitely one of the stages in his career, in my opinion, that's probably not going to be topped off from him, in my opinion. Albeit, Premier League players such as Daniel Welbeck can reach, good set of numbers, later on in their career. But I think when you have a player like Harry Wilson, I think it, for teams like Fulham, I think it definitely helps them, get these, consistent points in these games, as Louis was saying. I think Fulham in this transfer window specifically, I think they've been, doing really well, in my opinion. I think they're close to signing Oscar Bob from Manchester City. I think that'll be a great signing. I heard it's going to be a 5-year deal as well, permanent signing, so that'll be all good for them. But yeah, I think when you have players like Harry Wilson who are doing so well, I think, you just have to appreciate how good of a free kick that was as well. When you have players like that who can just, wrap it into the back of the net and get you all 3 points, it's just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Harry Wilson's doing very well. And of course, to attract the interest, if it's not for the rest of this window, last few days, but probably in the summer, of other big clubs. That's what happens when you perform, with a club that isn't in the top 6. Burnley and Tottenham then the next game. 4 goals at Moore, which is interesting, really. 2 defensive teams. On paper, this looked like a game that would have no goals and end up producing 4. Of course, the Premier League, you can never tell. That's why it's the best league and the hardest to predict. Cam, I'll start with you, of course, as a Spurs fan. For you, first question I'll ask you before we get into it is, do you view it as 1 point gained or 2 points dropped? And what I mean by that is the fact that Tottenham were somehow losing, going into the final stage of the game and managed to salvage a point. However, we were in a winning position in the games. It feels like we've thrown it away from being 1-0 up and in cruise control, but we've ended up not losing in the end because we were in a losing position. How do you view it?
Yeah, I think when you look at this game with context with how it's went, we went 1-0 up and then obviously we conceded 2 really avoidable goals as well. And we had to rescue a draw, obviously, later on, as you said. But I think, when you look at this game on paper, though, you think Burnley away, Tottenham Hotspur are going there, big 6 side, whatever our form is right now. But I think you can go into this game and be like, okay, we should really be dominating here. We should really be getting 3 points. And we've went into loads of these games thinking that, and we haven't, simply. But I think, when we have to rescue a draw at the end of the game like that, especially against a side who haven't particularly been great recently, I mean, albeit they got 2 great results, again, for my opinion, for Burnley against Man United and Liverpool, specifically the Liverpool game, considering I think that was definitely a smash and grab, that only shot on target in that game. But I think for us, with how we're doing right now, I think you kind of just have to take the point at this rate, because I mean, I can see where people come from in terms of it's 2 points dropped, but it's also a point gained. But Burnley are 19th in the table. We've lost to West Ham. We've lost to we haven't lost to Wolves yet, but we've failed to beat Wolves. And when you're playing 2 sides like that, which I don't want to cause any disrespect, but I think they're definitely two sides which, very winnable games, when you look at the top of the table as well, when you compare both of those. But yeah, I think we went into this game, I reckon for the most part, Spurs fans were probably, thinking this was going to be a winnable one, but of course it wasn't. And with the games we've got coming up, I kind of fear for what's going to happen in those ones. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we just have to take the point. But it doesn't change the fact that we are winless in 5 league games now. I think we've gotten 2 wins in 15 league games, which pretty much just says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, so in the last 15 Premier League games, there's only been 2 sides that have got less points than Tottenham, and those are Burnley and Wolves. And Wolves only a couple less as well, to give people an idea of how bad Tottenham are at the minute. But Cam, a lot of people are critical of Thomas Frank. I completely understand why, and of course made many mistakes and is understandably under pressure considering Tottenham's situation. But do you see where I'm coming from when I say what I'm about to say? So my view is Frank's at fault for a lot of things. We spoke about it before, so I'm not going to bore you with, he's just a small problem and there's bigger problems, because I think we both feel similar on that. What I will say is, though, I think there's a Tottenham Hotspur mentality issue against the smaller teams, and this is not a Frank issue, just a Frank issue anyway, because under Ange, right, we lost to Wolves, Ipswich and Leicester, just to give you an example, right? And struggled against any team, Sheffield United, whoever it may be, we really struggled against, the bottom teams. It's been the same this year, as you've spoken about there. There seems to be an ongoing problem, doesn't it? When there's an expectation for Tottenham to win that we don't deliver. When there's a little bit of a free hit with no expectation, like Borussia Dortmund, for example, we deliver.
Yeah, it feels like almost as if our team kind of fumbles under the pressure almost, and kind of, in these type of games, as you say, like Wolverhampton Wanderers at home or away, those type of games against newly promoted sides as well, I think, our team can almost just, I feel like they almost just rock up there and feel like, okay, yeah, this game is done, we can win this game easily. And yeah, the story is there, we end up not winning it. And I think we go into these type of games almost just, thinking that we can go up there and win. But, I think they've almost got to realise that the Premier League, there's no easy game in the Premier League. We've seen that, especially this season as well. But I think as a whole, you shouldn't underestimate anyone in the Premier League. And, I think when we played Wolves at home earlier on in the season, they had 0 points and they almost beat us. I feel like, there's definitely no game in the Premier League, especially this season, where you can just look at it and be like, okay, that's a guarantee of 3 points. At least from my point of view, with Tottenham Hotspur right now, I think, teams at the top of the table, I mean, even teams at the top of the table, they can't go into these games against bottom half teams and, think it's easy. That's the same with Arsenal as well, because they played Wolves at home. It wasn't, I mean, I know they won the game, but it wasn't a particularly comfortable one, in my opinion, with 2 own goals. But yeah, I feel like, there's no easy game in the Premier League. I think, as you said, there's definitely a sort of mentality problem at the club. It's not, you can't put the blame completely on Thomas Frank, can you? But it's not blameless at all. I've said that multiple times. But I feel like, with our club, I feel like there's that sort of mentality problem that I think needs to be looked at and sorted out with.
Cam, thank you. And lastly, before I move around to the rest of the panel on this game, you've got Xavi Simons coming out after the game saying it's unacceptable, the result, but he also said it's unacceptable the way that Tottenham conceded the 2 goals. In his words, they were avoidable completely. And Thomas Frank, however, taking a different line, saying he was going as far as saying he's really happy and proud of the performance. He thinks we're very close to getting things right. So a lot of people look at that and go, Thomas, what are you watching? And then he says things like, maybe it's not quite the result we wanted. It's not even convincing in saying that it wasn't a good result. So can you understand fans' frustration, which their frustration goes beyond Frank, but when he says things like that, like he in his head, he thinks that Tottenham are very close, and however you like it, well, you can look at it 2 ways, right? Tottenham, this depends if your glass half full or half empty. This has been my point to Spurs fans, right? 9 points off Europe right now, but 8 points away from relegation zone. We have the 4th best away form in the league, but the 19th best home form, second to last. Champions League, it's the complete opposite. We actually have the best Champions League home form, the joint best Champions League home form, which is just unthinkable because you can't win a game at home for love nor money in any other competition other than in Europe. So that's just crazy. So whatever way you look at it, it depends if you're positive or not. But just Thomas Frank's comments after the game really don't help him. And things he said in the past, you'll know it as well, in terms of, look, I've never got any criticism to my face. Or now every week he's booed and taunted by the Spurs fans. Spurs fans in this game, Cam, we're singing sideways, backwards everywhere we go. Frank, get out the club, and a load of chants. Some were going way too far with Thomas Frank, but they were directed at him constantly, just him, nobody else. So what did you make of Frank's post-match comments and also Xavi Simons?
Yeah, I felt the cycle of a Tottenham game is just fail to win the game. Before the game, we felt like we're going to dominate, and then we don't. And then Frank says we dominated, and then a player comes out and is like, this is unacceptable, this has to be fixed. It feels like they're just on two different wavelengths. But yeah, I feel like, Thomas Frank, not just after the Burnley game, but I feel like in general, as you've said, he really doesn't help with, the pre and post-match comments, in my opinion, because, he'll always say something that's different, to what actually happened in the game. But I feel like his kind of mindset, at least in my opinion, I think his mindset with, as he said, how he finished 17th last season and whatnot, I feel like his almost kind of aim with, definitely our injury crisis. I mean, our injury crisis has been ridiculous. If you've looked at it, you'll definitely see that we've been struggling there. But I think his aim kind of almost for this season is just, okay, we finished 17th last season. Let's not finish 17th. Let's finish above 17th. I guess that's just kind of what he's trying to do, in my opinion. I think when the supporters look at us and we see that we're 14th, for a club that we are consistently, finishing in the top 4, top 5, top 6, etc., etc. I think with how we had a poor league campaign last season, I think Thomas Frank just looks at that and is like, okay, we're just gonna finish above 17. Doesn't matter if it's 16th or 15th or 4th, whatever. But I think, I think he has to kind of look at it from okay, we're closer to a relegation battle and, trying to survive than actually trying to go for European football, which for a lot of the fans, I think, is unacceptable, of course. Because I think I think Thomas Frank also has to look from the point of view that we won a trophy last season. I think he has to kind of almost look from the fans' point of view. Okay, we also won a trophy last season. We have to kind of kick on from there. And
but he started off with respecting Ange, didn't he? But now he's saying like, "Oh, we're not a Champions League club, and we got lucky to be in there, because we won the Europa League, etc." And he's kind of saying, "Look, you got to remember we finished 17th." So he's kind of gone back on that. So it just feels
to be fair, he actually kind of had a dig at not Thomas Frank. Thomas Frank had a dig at Ange straight after. I'm not too sure. I can't remember what game it was. It was something about at least this season we're actually trying to defend or something like that. Kind of having a little dig there is kind of,
and it's just everything's changed, isn't it? The summer he's like, "Oh, we're going to play positive football. We're going to do this." And he's really nice with the fans, but everything's just changed with results. He's been nasty about the past, with the club's history, with Ange Postecoglou, with everything. He's just changed. So not a good look at all. But Cam, thank you very much. If I come to you, Matt, for Burnley, how do you view it for them? Because it feels like they need to start getting wins, but at the same time, a draw against Liverpool, a draw against Man United, or a draw against Tottenham, it doesn't sound too bad, but it felt like they've left it so long and they've got to this point where they're so many points adrift and they need to start winning games.
Look, I think the past couple of games that they've had, they'll look on that as their good points. I think this game, they were headed into it as, we can win this. It's not we'll win this. We can win this. It's a possible result that we can get 3 points here. And I think they'll come out of this game quite disappointed that they don't have all 3 points, because in the first half, for 10-15 minutes, I thought you had them on the back rope. But in general, in that first half, I actually thought it was quite even. And then in the second half, I thought Burnley were very, very good in the structure that they had. I mean, their goalkeeper made some fantastic saves. Their defending was pretty much near perfect, if anything, apart from a couple of mistakes. And I think they'll look on it as they'll be quite disappointed with only 1 point. And just quickly on Tottenham, I'm taking off my Arsenal hat here. I would be quite worried if I was a Tottenham fan, because you had a couple of games but you should have won, or you should have at least got more than, I think, 2 or 3 points you got. You should have got at least 10 points, let's say. And you're heading into these next 5 games, and they don't look winnable at all, and they don't look like you're even going to get a point out of them. And this season, the relegation fighting teams, they're not Southampton from last season. They still are, not as good as the top end teams, but last season I think we had one of the worst relegation fights we've ever had in terms of the points. I can definitely see West Ham, potentially even Burnley, getting 40 points, and that makes fighting relegation quite hard. And you're picking up a lot of injuries. Bergvall pretty much out for majority of this season. Kudos the same. And I just look at it as, where is Spurs next going to get a win? And I think your next game coming up is kind of determines whether you are in a proper relegation battle, in that if you win that game, you've then got an advantage in the next couple of big games because you've won that first big game. If you lose that first big game, I think it could be very, very worrying.
And the thing is, I 3 times now have looked at Tottenham's fixtures, and every 3 times I've done it, this is coming as someone who's positive. I haven't got Tottenham to get to 40 points. And that for me is a huge concern, right? I think it's honestly huge, because teams down the bottom, I'm not going to say they are necessarily going to get to 40 points, but some are definitely capable of doing so, right? I think Leeds United are capable of getting to 40 points. I think Forest and West Ham could get close. I don't know whether they get to 40, but I think they can definitely get to 37, 38. So I honestly, hand on heart, think that Tottenham will not go down, but I actually think that we'll stay up by a point or 2. I think it'll be that scary come the end, and I think Frank will make it through to the end. But it's either way, it's scary. And you're hearing today big sources, The Athletic, David Olsen, a load of different sources saying that Tottenham are scared of appointing an interim. And when you have a board that's scared of doing something, how do you think that rubs off to the rest of the club? They're scared. How do you think we feel? Watching the team every week. So concerning things right now.
I think Tottenham are in a really hard position where they don't want to sack Thomas Frank, because who do they get in? And if they get in, like an interim, will that put them in a relegation fight, or will that take them out? So I think they're kind of like, he lost against West Ham. That's a very, very poor result. But he beat Dortmund, and he got a point against Burnley. And I think that's why he's not been sacked, because he didn't lose to Burnley. I think had he lost to Burnley, I think he probably would have been gone. But 1 point's probably saved him, and I think that's going to be really annoying for Tottenham fans, because I think with Thomas Frank, he's really he's a small fish in a big pond, essentially, and he looks like he's really struggling with the media, with the players. I mean, the fact that Xavi Simons said what he said, that essentially undermines what a manager's overall thought of the game is, and I think that's quite detrimental.
I think you're right, and I see what you're saying as well. But I think it's actually quite easy for them. I don't get it wrong; it's not plain sailing easy, but for me, buy some players. Don't retract your squad.
Oh, I
right?
agree. I agree with that.
Really, if the manager, they're not aligned at all. They're playing this game. They're in love, and everything's aligned. They have lunch 3 times a week. We hear this from Frank, and everything's rosy. But the reality is, Frank come out and said, "I do not want any player leaving." Colomwani and Kinski are expected to leave before the end of the window. How's that alignment in any way? And the Tottenham squad's retracted because we've got 6 players injured since the window. I get that's not their fault. And we sell Brennan Johnson, who hasn't been replaced. More players will leave the door. So for me, we've got worse in January, and other teams, West Ham, for example, have got better. And I actually think, Louis, all jokes aside, that you'll be similar to where we are come the end of the year. I think we'll both be fighting for the same thing. Yeah, that's the thing. And the further we progress in the Champions League, we don't beat Frankfurt tomorrow. That's an extra 2 games. That always means less points or more injuries. So take your pick which one it is. So not good at all. But we've spoken about this game for a while. Axel Twansabi, by the way, as well, getting his first Premier League goal. So congratulations to him. Man City and Wolves and City back to winning ways in the league. Louis, I'll come to you. Semenya, I mean, very bright, hasn't he? Started, his City career very well, and he shone again in this game.
He did, and honestly, there's no surprise that he's done as well as he has, and I'm sure that, with some time, let's say in the next 5 weeks, I'm sure we're going to be on this pod again, and we're going to be saying how well he's been doing again, and how he's got some goals for City in the crucial moments where they needed to. He is a fantastic player, and there's no doubt about it. That is full stop, bang on. He's a great player. I do want to quickly put on a word on Wolves here. And watching this game really reminded me of another game, and I was trying to remember which one it was. And it was Man City against Sunderland, where I believe City won 3-0 or something like that, or 4-0 maybe. And it just reminded me of how the game could have gone so differently had 1 or 2 chances gone in. Again, Wolves are not a bad side now. In 2026, they've got this. They've rejuvenated themselves, and they're back into this fight. Obviously, maybe not to stay up, but as in just to give teams a good go. And they had some fight throughout this game. If we think about it, if maybe 1 or 2 of the chances went in, just maybe even one of them, you could have thought this whole game could have transformed and flipped on its head. And, in these games like that, anything can happen. We saw Leeds nearly got a result against City. We've seen other teams get results against City. They are not a team that are walking over everyone as they have been in the past. But they were clinical enough to keep them out. And obviously this is all just ifs, which goes to show that City was still the better side by far. But it's more to focus on the positivity of Wolves rather than City here.
God, button got stuck there. Sorry. No, I completely agree with you. Trying to find the button. No, I think you're absolutely right. And you're right. Wolves are a completely different side, in the new year. And, again, unless you have some kind of bad feeling with Wolves, I think it's nice to see. You don't want a club that just falls behind everyone else, right? And really struggling. It doesn't look good. We don't want kind of Derby low points tally, or what we've seen last year. I like that all the teams down the bottom are competitive. Even not maybe the best, they're competitive, which matters. I think it's good to see. It's healthy for the league. It's a good outfit. It's a good look as well for the Premier League as a whole. No, thank you very much. I come to you, Matt. Mark Gay, it was his debut. How do you thought he got on? I think ultimately he will mean, him coming into the side, I think will mean City are better defensively and keep more clean sheets. Hard to judge against Wolves, who've been, better in 2026. They are bottom of the league, but you made a couple of key blocks in this game. A good debut, I'd say.
Yeah, he had a pretty good debut. He kept it calm, simple, clean sheet on his debut. He didn't really put a foot wrong, and you can already see how structured defensively they've improved, even by just adding one defender with that quality into the team. And I think we'll see him, adjust more to Pep's system. And I think he'll be a fantastic player for them. I mean, his wages are crazy, but he's going to be a fantastic player for them.
I think it'd do very well there. Thank you very much. Next game then, Bournemouth and Liverpool, which ended 3-2 to the Cherries. And this was a big game. Cam, I'll start with you. There's so much to talk about in this game. It's difficult to know where to start, if I'm totally honest with you. But give us your overall thoughts before we dive into it a little bit more on this game. Because it was 5 goals. And when Bournemouth play, they're going to concede goals, but you also know they're going to score goals. So this is a good outfit, isn't it? What Bournemouth in particular are all about.
Yeah, I always love watching Bournemouth, to be honest. I mean, every single game of theirs is really entertaining, a win, draw, or loss. But yeah, I think this is a really good win for them. And, against a side like Liverpool, albeit, they've had their struggles this season, when Bournemouth play Liverpool, on paper, you're going to expect Liverpool to win the game. And, I think Bournemouth, their attack and their overall play in the area has been nothing short of superb. And, yeah, I think, when you score 3 goals like that, especially against a side like Liverpool, as I've said, it's definitely, not something that, it's definitely something that should be noticed, in my opinion. You've got players like Amin Adli, Evan Nilsson, Rayan, who come to Bournemouth. I think when you add players like that to your side, especially for a team like them, I think, you can definitely say that they're going to do something good on their level, I think, in my opinion. I think as for Liverpool, though, it's another loss. It's not where they want to be at the moment. They're, going into these type of games and, struggling to get much out of them. They drew against Burnley last week, at home. That's a game for them, in my opinion, but I think they should definitely be winning. Bournemouth, they're a side that are going to give it a real go, as, a lot of teams have done this season. But I think, Liverpool can, they've got 2 goals, so, they'll probably feel, fairly ashamed of themselves. I mean, they got a late equaliser through Dominic Szoboszlai, which, from there, in my opinion, with 10-15 minutes to go plus stoppage time, I think they should definitely be going into that final stage of the game, trying to win it. And it went the complete other way. And when Bournemouth scored that last goal, I feel like, I'm going to get to this. Virgil van Dijk, yeah. I feel like this season, he's put a foot wrong in so many games, in my opinion. He's not been the Virgil van Dijk that we know how good he's been for Liverpool over the past few years, but this season I just feel like we've seen a completely different side to him. And I think Virgil van Dijk's always done this, but when the last goal went in for Bournemouth, I think he was complaining about something. He's always complaining about something, to be fair. But that's me talking about the defensive side to this game. Of course, that set piece that header that he scored, that was a great goal, in my opinion. I look at Liverpool and I think they should definitely be getting so much more out of these type of games. And it's always with the story of Liverpool this season, Amin Adli, 95th minute winner. They're always they're going into the later stages of these games almost kind of feeling the pressure, not able to get it over the line, in that sense. And I feel like with that kind of bit about their game, I feel like it's cost them so many points this season.
Yeah, it definitely has. I think it'd be fair to say thank you, Louis. I mean, Cam, I think, makes some good points there. And if we focus on Liverpool, we discussed Bournemouth a little bit there, and just how a familiar story for Bournemouth, apart from this time get the result, but the way they play, lots of goals in their games. But with Liverpool, I just feel like a result like this increases pressure on the manager, because, like he did with Thomas Frank, because ultimately Tottenham and Liverpool are struggling in their own ways. Tottenham more dramatically, but Liverpool have fallen off the cliff, even bigger than Spurs. But the point is, both of them lost to Bournemouth, the only sides to do so since October. It's not a good look. Let's focus on Arne Slot in this case. It's not a good case for him to keep his job, because Liverpool are really struggling for consistency at the minute, and just the way they conceded goals, it doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't look good. And I remember saying, maybe a handful of weeks ago now, saying that when a manager has that fall off, how likely are they to come back up? How many times do they recover from that moment? It's so rare, especially in the Premier League. It's so rare to see. And unfortunately, I think the ship has already sailed for Arne Slot. Even if he comes back now, do you remember when Liverpool had that really, really bad spells a bit earlier on, a bit towards later on in 2025, and then they had a streak of where they went on and won about 4 to 5 games. People still weren't convinced of him. They still were saying, "Oh, let's get him gone." He's really that ship has sailed, and I think this is the nail in the coffin, because despite Bournemouth scoring a last-minute winner, it wasn't one of those where I sat there and thought, you know what, Liverpool really deserved to win this game. I thought Bournemouth deserved to win it, and they were the better team. Liverpool looked bleak. The defending was poor. The attacking capabilities, they're relying on players. That's not Liverpool. Liverpool don't rely on individuals. Look at West Ham, they rely on Jarrett Bowen. Look at Fulham, they're relying on Harry Wilson. These types of clubs, they rely on players to get them up the table. When you're a top 6 club, you rely on a squad to push for a league. They're relying on players like Szoboszlai. How many times has Szoboszlai bailed out Liverpool this season? If you're managing Liverpool, you shouldn't have to have a player bailing you out. And I think without Szoboszlai, Arne Slot would probably have already been gone. I mean, he's kept him in the job, and I think a sack is imminent. Whether that's today, tomorrow, or towards the end of the season, there has to be a point where Liverpool get rid of Arne Slot, because he's lost the fans, and when you lose the fans, it's difficult.
He's lost the fans, right, mostly because of what he says in press conferences, and it is utterly embarrassing, some of the things he says. And most of the Liverpool fans are just like, why are you saying that? Like, he was dissing the club. He pretty much said, this is a club that's won 3 Premier Leagues in, I think, won 2 Premier Leagues in about 30 years. And I've won one of those. So he's essentially said that this club has won pretty much nothing in terms of in England for the past 30 years. And when you say stuff like that, it's just embarrassing as well. And the question's got to be asked: was it Klopp's squad that won him the Premier League last season, or was it Slot's masterclass of being a manager? Because it's a sheer difference from last season, and essentially that's because he's brought his own players, he's been able to buy his own players, and he's proved that he can't build a team, and that he has to rely on a world-class squad that Klopp inherited, or that he inherited.
Absolutely, I think it's fair to say. But yeah, the misery continues for Liverpool, as does for Crystal Palace, let's just say, and Oliver Glasner. Goodness me, what is going on there? I mean, if I'm being honest with you, I really like Glasner, but I think he's checked out, if I'm totally honest with you. I'm not saying that he's wanting them to lose, but I think his head is definitely elsewhere. And this game ending 3-1 to Chelsea. This is a game, go back a couple of months, the Crystal Palace, make no mistake about it. Even with Chelsea, new life under new manager, I think they'll be winning this. Palace are dangerous at home, especially in these type of big games. Louis, can I start with you? What are your thoughts on this game? Because scoreline, in the end is kind of Crystal Palace, and it could have been Chelsea 3-0 up, sorry, at one point. It did end 3-1 though. What are your thoughts overall on the 90 minutes as Palace's frustration continues?
Matt has just had to go, and I think he might be a bit sheepish after his prediction that he made of Palace winning this game. I very, very vividly remember that due to the prediction that I made. And it was simply due to the fact that, Palace hadn't beaten Chelsea within their last 19 meetings, and that 19 has now become 20. It's simply Palace were not good enough, and Palace were poor. They didn't have answer to Chelsea's, attacks. You saw with Esteval on the first goal, a great ball over the top, down the inside, and Esteval just uses his skill, 1-0 up. João Pedro smashes it through the keeper. Third goal, a little bit more contentious maybe. Penalty could be a bit harsh. When I watched it at first, I thought, that might not be a penalty. In my opinion, it isn't a penalty. But regardless, penalty or not, Palace were not going to get anything from the game. Consolation goal at the end, the Wharton red card. It's the first ever time Palace have lost a game whilst conceding 3 goals at home with a red card. It's the first time it's ever happened in Palace's history. And it goes to show, from winning the FA Cup to where they are now, it's worrying. It's very, very worrying. And I said it last week and I'll say it again. I do believe that Palace need to sack Glasner. Not because he's not a good manager. He's a great manager. But he doesn't have the tools. And he doesn't have the ability to maintain with what they've got. They've got a game against Forest next week where they don't have Adam Wharton. They need to win that game. I'm not just saying that because I am a West Ham fan. I'm saying that as the sake of their season. they will be dragged into this relegation fight, and they are dropping points. They are dropping like a stone. I was saying about Fulham, you take back 10 weeks ago when they were fighting relegation and now they're in Europe. It's the other way for Palace. They were fighting and knocking on the doors of top four. Now they're fighting relegation. And if teams do pick up points around them, they could be plummeting a lot quicker than some people are anticipating them to. And they need a very, very good last few days of the window. I think there's 6 days left of the window now. They need to make a lot of signings in those 6 days.
They certainly do. Yes.
Louis, I heard you about my prediction, and it couldn't have been any more wrong. I mean, they just got absolutely battered. Crystal Palace did, and the first goal was down to them in that a stupid back pass to literally nobody, and Esteval was away. And it's just moments like that where I think that they've lost Mark Gahey. They've lost a player that has got a presence in their defence that makes them calm and resolute, and they've just lost that, and they don't know how to replace that. And I think they're going to go from bad to worse over the next couple of weeks.
I do think Glasner's been let down, like, sending Gahey and Eze previously a day before. I think, top manager like that, I don't think Palace deserve him. If I'm honest with you, I feel like they've treated him generally badly, but also you've got to remember Glasner does have a track record of, I don't want to say downing tools if that's fair, but certainly, spitting his dummy out, some would say, or certainly having a moan. He loves a little moan, and he's done that at Frankfurt ultimately. But at the same time, I think he has a right to. When you win a trophy, I know he's got a contract, a job, he's paid, everything like that. But the point is, he won a trophy at Frankfurt, won Europa League, at Crystal Palace, won the FA Cup and won the Community Shield. That's significant, especially that FA Cup. I feel like you have that little bit of wiggle room. I personally believe that Steve Parish has let him down. He would say, "Oh look, we spent all this money on Brennan Johnson." Can we be able to tell you like I can? As much as you like Brennan Johnson for that moment where he got the winning goal in the Europa League and he's our top scorer last year, in terms of all-round performance, he's not dazzling on the eye. He's not going to transform Crystal Palace. He'd be there at the back post to tap it in, but that's about it realistically. They overpaid for him like we did at the time. That's why I think we accepted the offer. But Palace not in a good way at the moment. But Matt, if I do come to you, of course you chipped in with a comment earlier. Louis mentions there, which is interesting, that he said that Crystal Palace could get involved into a relegation scrap. I think that's fair to say. Would you agree with that? And can you see them going down?
I'm just going to quickly look at the league table.
Bring it up.
They're on points with Tottenham, to be fair. And if we're counting Tottenham slipping down into a relegation fight, you've got to include Crystal Palace. And I think that it's interesting because it's a type of team that you just wouldn't expect in a relegation fight, nor would you expect Tottenham. But I don't know. That's a really interesting one. It really depends on their next couple of fixtures. Because I think that over the next couple of weeks, this league will start to space itself out. I mean, this Premier League's been absolutely mental in that there's still 8 points gap between Tottenham and relegation, and there's like a 9-point gap between them and top four. Or is it a 9-point gap? No, it's a 10-point gap. But it's like it's been so close from 5th to 14th. Now, I've never ever seen that in a Premier League season in January, and we're coming into February now. And yeah, I think you do have to include them in. They could potentially be slipping into a relegation fight with their lack of results, but also their lack of investment, and they're losing players, and they've lost one of their best players. So yeah, I think that's more than fair.
I agree with you. I think it is definitely more than fair. Worrying times. But Cam, before we move on with Chelsea, another positive result under Liam Rossino. I think he started off really well, and again, not always the prettiest, but getting the result. And I know we've spoken about it several times on this podcast about him and how he's getting on. But again, another week goes by, and it's another positive result for him.
Yeah, I think it's a great result for him. I think, that's 4 wins in 5 now for Liam Rossino at Chelsea. And, I think whilst Chelsea fans have been fairly unhappy with at least from what I've seen, about Liam Rossino and kind of, what he's like at the club. I mean, albeit, he's gotten some good results so far, but I think, I think you can relate, Harry, at the start with Thomas Frank at Tottenham. I think, although we were getting some good results, I feel like at times our fans were kind of almost unhappy to an extent with what Thomas Frank was kind of like, how he was doing at the club, if that makes sense. I feel like, that's just my personal opinion, but I feel like for Chelsea overall, it's a great result. It's against a side which, you can definitely get 3 points against at the moment, because Crystal Palace right now, as it stands, are winless in 11 games in all competitions, which, for me, that's just ridiculous. But there's been a lot of sides this season, in all fairness, that have been winless in, a fair chunk of games. But yeah, I think for Crystal Palace, I think it's not going to get any better for him, in my opinion. I think, as Matt said, when you lose a player like Mark Gay, for them, that's a really important player, and that's one of their most important players. And they've been losing a lot of their important players very recently, like Mark Gay, like Eberechi Eze, and even Michael Olise in the past. I think, I don't really see him doing any better, especially when they have that only player who hasn't been sold yet, and Adam Wharton, now suspended in that game against Forest, which is a must-win. I just don't see him really doing any better from it. But I think for Chelsea, when you have players like Esteban who've just come into the Premier League, I feel like you have to praise them, don't you? I mean, when you have that type of quality, I mean, obviously you've got Cole Palmer, but he's out. I think you can say for sure that he's one of their most important players. But I think when you have someone like Esteban, who, whilst Cole Palmer's out, you have Esteban who come in for him. I think against a team like Palace, and against Palace, obviously, I think he's a player right now who, in good form, I think is definitely someone who can just get in behind that defence and cause problems. Albeit Crystal Palace, they've done it themselves. It was a poor back pass and definitely a very avoidable goal. But I think when you have Esteban in behind like that, I think when you're up against those type of players, at least for Crystal Palace, in my opinion, I think you're 100% going to get punished.
I agree with that. That's very fair to say. Thank you. Cam, sticking with you as we move on to the next game, Newcastle and Villa at St James's Park, which ended 2-0 to Villa. Huge result for Aston Villa. I personally look at a result like this. Unai Emery will know the situation of his team and what they're capable of a lot more than I will, or anyone else will, let's be honest. But I just feel like when he says that Villa aren't even top 5 contenders, for me, it proves that that's reactionary at the time after a game when they go and get a result like this, because Newcastle are definitely contenders for Europe. Tough place to go to James's Park. I look at a result like this and I go, Villa, for me, definitely can get minimum top 3. I honestly think that they play like this and get a result like this. It just feels like a significant result for Villa.
Yeah, I think Villa can be very happy with that. And, when, albeit, Newcastle, whilst I think they haven't been great as of recently, I think you go into this type of game and think, okay, this is a game where we could definitely struggle. But I think, at least for the most part, I think Aston Villa, throughout the majority of this game, were in clear control. I think, for some parts of the game, I think there were times where, they were on the back foot and, they were, at times kind of struggling with, what Newcastle were doing. But I think, Newcastle, they didn't get anything out of the game. They couldn't even get a goal. And, at home in a game like this, you'd definitely expect them to, and you'd probably expect them to win the game. But with how they're doing right now, I think, with how Aston Villa are doing as well, Aston Villa are joint second now with Manchester City. They're doing really well at the moment. And with the current form that we're in, I think, this is a great result for them. And, they're, getting back-to-back wins and doing really well, in my opinion. I think Newcastle, though, you go into this type of game and they haven't been great as terms of their away games recently. I mean, they went into that game against Wolves and they weren't amazing. And then they come at home and you think that they can do much better, as they have been. But, I think they're going to be disappointed with that, because albeit, they went 1-0 down to a great strike by Emi Buendia. That's a wonderful strike, wonderful goal. But I think from there, I think they actually had some fairly decent chances in the first and in the second half to try and get something out of this game. I think that header that they had the chance in the box, I think great save by Aaron Martinez. And I think from there, I think Newcastle, I thought they were going to get an equaliser and potentially try and chase, Aston Villa to get something out of that game. But I think it shows for Newcastle United, the story of their season, that they'll go 1-0 down, they'll be trying to chase a goal, whether 1-0 down or whether 0-0. And I feel like they fail to, really be clinical in that final third. And I think from there, they kind of just get a little bit tired and concede that second goal, concede that first goal, or however many they have. And I feel that's just kind of how they've been this season. And for me, I think that needs to change on Eddie Howe.
Totally agree with you. I think you're right with that. Thank you. Louis, on Newcastle, it just feels like they literally couldn't back up their result really positive against PSV, but maybe Newcastle experiencing some fatigue. They looked a bit lackluster, and Villa had control of this one.
They've had problems with injuries, Newcastle, but the problem I have is this is becoming a bit too repetitive for the Newcastle we've been seeing as of late. It's this whole thing of picking up form, and they look really good and they look like they're back on track, and then they get a bad result, and then they get good again and a bad result. And it's just this consistency that they've recently accumulated and achieved across these past few seasons have really got them into a position where they've consistently been able to achieve European football. But it almost just seems that, realistically, if you ask Newcastle fans, considering where they are at the moment, considering their situation in the past few seasons, they want to be in the Champions League. And I think that's acceptable to say, considering how they have been. But the problem that we've got here now is they don't have Champions League form, and the likes of Manchester United, Chelsea, are getting results where they need to. In these tough games, they are achieving the results. And sure, it might be fatigue, but when you're at the top level, you have to compete with these levels of fatigue. You have to be there with the rest, which is something that, when you see a smaller team get into European football, you realise how much they suffer come the Premier League. When we look at, for example, Spurs last season, not say you're a smaller team, but we looked at Spurs, we saw the fatigue that they had. We looked at Leicester in their previous European campaigns, West Ham, the likes of Brighton as well. All of these teams struggled once they got into Europe for the first time because they didn't have the squad depth. Newcastle have been in Europe now enough. They should have had squad depth for this. They need to be prepared. And if that's a fall on poor investments, we saw with Wissa, they barely had him this season, and we're coming towards we're 2/3 of the way through the season, and they haven't been able to utilise him entirely. It's not been good enough. The investment hasn't been good enough. The transfers that they've got haven't been good enough. For example, I thought when they bought Alanga initially, I thought it was a great deal, but I haven't seen him do much. Wissa, injury prone. These signings are the ones that are going to cost you. And I think Newcastle are now suffering those consequences, and they're going to have to make the most out of this season.
They're definitely experiencing a lot of injuries. It's not good right now for Eddie Howe. And to be fair, Newcastle have gone a resurgence. We're in a difficult place, bottom half, but still lacking that little bit of consistency. Thank you all. If I come to you, Matt, for the next game, Brentford and Nottingham Forest, I didn't really see this coming before a ball was kicked. And when Louis talks about West Ham results for West Ham not going their way, I think this is a good example of this. I think this is what one of the games he's talking about here with Forest ultimately getting a win, which West Ham are trying to catch. With this one, strange, isn't it, really? Forest in Europe, really bad result. Brentford, high flying everywhere else. So was this one of these games that just went completely against what was expected?
Yeah, because Forest obviously got Sean Dyche, not really known for getting away wins and playing good football, but I actually thought that they had a good game. They won with 2 goals, both of their strikers scoring actually, and Igor Žežić with a lovely swivel and a shot. And I was a bit disappointed by Brentford because a player who I like quite a lot, and I wouldn't mind about Arsenal, is Thiago. He didn't really do anything. Brentford, full stop. They had one shot on target. They were really poor, especially at home, and especially for a team that were 5th place heading into this weekend. I believe they were 5th place, or might be 7th or 6th, but they were, quite high up in the table, and against Nottingham Forest, poor result.
Definitely, again, one of those that is not looking good at all for Brentford because they've been good this season, but this result may be a little bit of a setback, to be fair to say. Not disastrous, but a setback. Cam, coming to you for Forest, I mean, the results in the league have been better recently, of course, not transpiring in Europe. So do you think for Forest, if they don't go through, which is a possibility, of course, in Europe, that could be a blessing in disguise to them? Of course, frustrating. It won't help Sean Dyche and any pressure on him. But I mean, they can focus on the league because they're not doing too bad. They're playing better and getting results.
Yeah, I feel like they shouldn't throw Europe completely, but I feel like, for a club like them and kind of what their situation is, I mean, I know they've done really well last season, but they've also lost key players. And I kind of almost feel like, they should almost look at Europe and be like, okay, if we do get eliminated, it's not, the end of the world, because at the end of the day, we're trying to fight relegation here. We're trying to survive. And when you go into these type of games and get 3 points, against Brentford, a team that could have been 6th and above Liverpool if they won against Nottingham Forest. But yeah, I think Nottingham Forest can be really happy with that. And, they got that goal at the end to kind of seal it as well. I think, as Matt said, one shot on target for Brentford, considering they're at home as well against a side that they can definitely beat, in my opinion. I think that's really poor on Brentford's end. But for Nottingham Forest, I think, that's an amazing win for them. And I think for the most part, they definitely deserve that. And, they pretty much put Brentford on their back foot for majority of that game. Both their strikers, Igor Jesus and Tyrell Awoniyi, scoring. Awoniyi not really been in the goals recently. I'm not sure if he was injured or if he just wasn't playing, but I've not really seen him score for Forest recently. But I think, with how Brentford have done at home this season and in general this season, I think Forest can look at that and be very happy considering they got a clean sheet and they got all 3 points.
Oh, indeed. Thank you very much. And Louis, no goal for Ego Thiago, but still, of course, in good form. But he'd be frustrated in this one. Forest managed to keep him quiet.
He's in good form, Harry, but I said this to you last week against Chelsea, and maybe some people didn't agree with my comments at the time, but I'll say them again because it's happened again. Sean Dyche clearly watched what Liam Rosenior did, and when you mark out Sharda and you mark out Thiago, Brentford have no impact. They have no impact at all, and teams will find them out now. And I said as soon as Chelsea found them out on that front, other teams will start to do it. And Nottingham Forest have played them a week later, and they've done exactly the same thing. They stuck 2 people on Thiago all game, and I think he had one shot all game, and it was off target. If you give him space, he will score. But when you got people on him, it gets a lot more tough.
This guy really likes Liam Rosenior. He can't stop talking about him.
Well, yeah, but it's also the fact that he was the first one to stop Igor Thiago this season. It's
Yeah.
gone well for him.
Good stuff. Maybe he's thinking he might be the West Ham manager, so he's trying to be kind to him. But next game is Arsenal and United. I'll come to you, Matt, of course, on this one. I'm sorry to bring you on in this circumstance, which is very rare. So not one that you've had experience to prepare for, I'm sure, while being on this podcast. But Arsenal 2, Man United 3. I can imagine you're really frustrated, right? Because I'm a neutral fan and I'm thinking, right, I put the bias aside. When you get that goal back to make it 2-2, deep down, I'm thinking you go on and win this game. I knew that Michael Carrick's team would keep attacking, but I thought that meant that you get gaps on the counter. I thought it could go either way, but I backed you because of the momentum, because of the swing. And it felt like for about 60 seconds after that you were going to do that. So are you frustrated to be sitting here, not only the fact that you haven't gone on to win it, but you've lost the game?
I'm really frustrated because from the start, we obviously got that 1-goal lead. And I was like, okay, this is good. We got an early goal. Can we get another? Man really put pressure on Man United. We just couldn't get that second goal before they scored. And the way they scored that first goal was absolutely criminal by Zubamendi and William Saliba. I will put blame on Saliba as well, because it was his, it was partly his fault as well. But Zubamendi, with a player so much technical ability, so much composure and calmness, he just panicked. And the one I'm so angered by what he did, because the one thing you're taught at by the age of 3 is you don't pass across your goal. That's the one thing that you get taught at such a young age at football, is you do not pass across your goal. And he essentially did that. And what I was watching the Sky Sports analyst from Jamie Carragher, and what he highlighted was Mbomo was very key in how he scored this goal, in that he was pressing quite high to Saliba instead of blocking off the passing lane to Gabriel, which was very risky, because we could just pass that to Gabriel and we could be off. But he stuck to his guns, and it was courage from Carrick to tell his players to do that. And that's essentially how that they scored. And then the Dorgu goal was incredible. I mean, I'm Man United. I'm an Arsenal fan, and I'm smiling because that goal was just incredible to watch. He, the 4-5 one-touch passes between him and Bruno. And I remember seeing like a video of Dorgu Bruno, and it was a pretty good goal. No chance for Raya at all. And again, Zubamendi caught sleeping in the middle, and that's 2 goals that he's been responsible for, in a way. And then we then get a goal back from a corner. Although just before that, Arteta made some substitutions, which for the first time in his career, I've never seen him do that. And I liked that, but I didn't like that, because it felt to me that he was panicking and the team was panicking, and he put 4 substitutes on. And I noticed that those 4 substitutes increased the average height of the players on the pitch. And obviously that's good for corners, but in terms of build-up play, chance creation, it's not necessarily the greatest thing, because you're taking off technical players. But that corner came in, and we score, and I'm like, okay, that is a very, very big goal, because there's still 30 minutes left of the game. Go and get the third. Go and win the game. And like, I was literally still saying that, go and win the game. I literally sat down on my sofa, grabbed my beer, and Cunha scored. And I was like, shit. Well, that's game. That is essentially game, because I felt that the team not gave up, but they just didn't have enough willpower or just belief that they could get a third and potentially draw that game. And what a goal that was, by the way. Again, Raya had no chance. And again, it wasn't Zubamendi, but it was in the middle of the park where we got dragged into a situation. It was essentially a training session for Man United in that scenario, where they had 3 players in a very small area with 6 of our players. That's essentially a training drill, and they executed that perfectly. So fair play to them. And again, great finish, into the bottom corner. And it was just very frustrating, because we were at home. And it's not necessarily the loss that's really annoyed me. It's the fact that we just didn't, care much. And we conceded 3 goals, and at home. We haven't done that. I can't remember the last time that we conceded 3 goals at home. But in terms of conceded 3 goals in one game, We haven't done that since Luton 3 years ago, and it's just criminal from some of our players. And I am heading to the game tomorrow, and I expect a better performance.
Definitely. I don't think Arsenal are at their best. It's fair to say. Matt, thank you for your thoughts as an Arsenal fan there. Cam, before we move on to the last game, for Manchester United, a lot better under Michael Carrick. So under Carrick, I mean, it's been the perfect start, hasn't it? 2 games, 2 wins, back-to-back wins, and Amorim had only done that once. He's time at the club. I like Ruben Amorim at times, but we only managed to do that once, and Carrick has done that. Matched that within 2 games.
Yeah, I think considering the level of the opponents that he's playing as well, obviously Manchester City and Arsenal, 2 very big games for Manchester United. I think, as Matt was saying, I think to an extent, I think Michael Carrick has just gotten these Manchester United players to almost kind of want the result more than the Arsenal players. I feel like they went into that game just wanting it more, wanting the 3 points more, wanting to win more. And I think, Ruben Amorim didn't or couldn't really get that out of them. And I think Michael Carrick's, given new ideas. He's brought kind of a new sort of point of view, if you know what I mean, in terms of Ruben Amorim. And they've rocked up to the Emirates, of course. Before this game, no one had won at the Emirates all season, and not many teams were in there in general, to be fair. And they've went there, scored 3 goals, and won the game. It's a perfect scenario. And yeah, I mean, albeit 3 shots on target, 3 goals went in. I think, Arsenal, I feel like they're going to feel just, blown away pretty much by that, because it's 2 quality goals as well. And I think when that first goal went in, I think, Arsenal were kind of almost expecting that they could take clear control of the game, albeit, it wasn't the most wonder of goals. But I feel like they've kind of almost done it to themselves in a case, because, of course, Zubimendi passing across his goal and Mbeumo was on it. And I think, as I was saying with Chelsea and Esteval earlier, when you give a player like Mbeumo that opportunity, he's not going to, just give it away pretty much. And I think the Arsenal are going to feel as if, whilst I think they could have definitely done a lot better in that game, I feel like they've almost kind of, and it's a bit weird, with how Man United have done in recent years, but I feel like, with, of course, how they've done in recent years, I feel like the only sort of player that's been able to get him through games is Bruno Fernandes. But they've got players like Mbeumo, like Cunha, even like Dorgu. I feel like Arsenal, to an extent, have kind of just been done by individual quality. That Dorgu strike, absolute wonder strike. Cunha as well, in that space. Literally all he has to do in that space is just shoot. And brilliant accuracy. I think, I rate them both so much. And I looked at them buying Matheus Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo. They both had amazing seasons at Brentford or Wolves. And I thought that those are 2 brilliant signings. And I know that they're going to do amazing at Man United. And, I think we saw against Manchester City as well. They had an amazing performance against Manchester City. They've shown that they can do it so far under Michael Carrick, at least, against the big teams. And now it's all about having that same mindset going into, perhaps, no disrespect, but the teams against, or the games against the smaller teams, where I feel like they have to have that same kind of desire to win the game. And right now, I'm not checked the table, but I'm pretty sure they're 4th in the table right now, somewhat near Aston Villa and Man City. But, as I was saying, I think they have to, with the schedule that they have, I feel like they need to go into every single game, no matter what opponent they've got, no matter who they're playing, no matter where they're playing. I feel like they've got to go into that game with the same mentality that Michael Carrick's brought.
Can I just
Thank you, Cam.
Yes, talk about how the Arsenal fan base have reacted to that game as well? Because I think it's absolutely...
they were so reactionary. Well, genuinely, they were.
It's absolutely embarrassing, because you would genuinely think from the reaction of some, Arsenal group chats that I'm in, that we were fighting relegation. And
some people were saying sack Arteta.
Yeah, exactly. And as much as I've got a lot of criticism for Arteta, a lot of that was on the players. Because I mean, Arteta didn't coach a win, but he definitely didn't coach a loss. And I just think that sometimes our fan base do things for clicks and attention, because it gets them famous on, Sky Sports or something like that. And I just think that we handled, or the reaction was just embarrassing, because we are still 4 points clear. We are still in 4 competitions. At the start of the season, we're still in 4 competitions. We're in a semi-final that is due to be played next week. I shall be heading to that, and I hope to be singing Wembley after that. And I just think our fan base need to take a step back and realize the situation we're in. The players that are returning and coming back. Yes, we've got a massive issue at chance creation, and I think we've always had that. That's never not gone away. The reason why we've been winning so many games is because we've covered that over with goals from set pieces to open the game up and to get that first goal, which is why you see a stat of like pretty much 70% or 80% of our games have the first goal that we've scored has been a set piece goal, not an open play goal, because we just fail to break down that low block. We don't have that chance creator that we thought we had, in Eze, and in Odegaard. And I just think that fans have sort of started to say, oh, but we're not, we're good at chance creation. We've never been good at that. And I just think our fans just need to take a step back and just realize the situation that we're in, like I said.
Matt, thank you there, being calm and kind of consistent as you always are. I mean, listen, just quickly, if you an Arsenal fan that wants Arteta out at this stage of the season, I'm sorry, but there's got to be something wrong in the head. I get it at the end of the year. Seriously though, in the position you're in, what more do they want? You to be another 6 points clear? You can't really do much more. But for Man United and Michael Carrick, it's a dream start. And United second and third goal, Dorgu and Cunha, absolutely superb. But Dorgu's now out for a few weeks. That's bad news though for United. Last game, Everton and Leeds. Before we wrap up, a couple of minutes to go. Louis, I'll give this one just to you. I mean, a game of two halves, really, wasn't it? Leeds United dominant in the first half. Everton, a lot more of the ball, more chances in the second half. It felt like that goal was coming. Barry got the goal in the end. So, give us your thoughts on that game. But also, if you can talk about Barry as well, who's in good form.
Yeah, that game, as you said, Harry, pretty much even summed it up there. It was a game of two halves, I thought, and Leeds really looked like they could have taken it in the first half. And it's quite surprising, actually, because Leeds often have a stronger second half than a first half. But again, that didn't appear to be the case in this instance. And Everton managed to, eke out that last bit of performance that they should have had. I mean, at home, you should have that advantage anyway. But I thought they did really, really well to get back in the game. And Barry, he's been a person that Everton thought was a flop at the beginning, labelled as a failure, and has now been the man to bring them back into the games. I think out of the last 10 shots he's had, he scored 5 goals. I mean, that is a great record. And I think Everton were quite unlucky to not get the full 3 points, I can't remember who it was. Somebody absolutely blazed the bar afterwards with a phenomenal strike. It might have been Dewsbury Hall, but I could have been wrong. And it was just a great strike, and it was very unlucky to not go in. And then it was also just a bit of a scramble towards the end of the game, and ultimately it just ended up in 1-1. I think I did predict a 1-1. Sort of teams are going to cancel each other out, and it almost seemed inevitable.
It did. Yeah, and just Barry, I just want to mention, really impressed me at the moment because he's in a good, patch of form and got a goal in this game, which he took well. But Louis, I don't know if you saw the goal in particular, but Barry, I think, does really well to get in front of his man. Ball comes in, and I did watch the game. one of the positives, I suppose, of having flu is that you're at home and you can see a lot more of the football. So you've got to clutch at those straws. But, it was a really nice goal. It was kind of come out of nothing, kind of gay, good movement, good ball. But Barry, I think, just does so well for the goal. That's a guy in great form, and Everton are crying out for goal scorers. If he plays like that every week, they'll be all right.
Yeah, if he plays like that every week, he'll have that consistency to keep getting goals, and it's a striker's dream to score. And consistently on a regular basis, he works off that confidence. And I think if he can keep doing that for Everton, he'll suddenly find himself scoring winning goals in a lot of games. And he was unfortunate that didn't spark a comeback. But I'm sure if he was to do that on a regular, as he has been, he'll be helping Everton maybe get on that European charge that they are half-heartedly fighting for, I would say.
Absolutely, which they are definitely half-heartedly fighting for. I don't think they get it, if I'm honest with you. Consistency, I think, will let them down. But that wraps us up, I think, for this episode of the Scarfey Talks Premier League podcast. As you reviewed Game Week 23, come back on Thursday, 6 p.m. as we preview Game Week 24. Let's go through one by one. Let's say goodbye to the panel and see who you can find them on social media. Thank you to all you listening at home, at work, wherever you may be for this podcast. Big up to you. We really do appreciate your support. Matt, where can people follow you on social media?
On X here.
Good stuff. On Instagram as well?
On Instagram's private, so probably not.
My bad, no worries. Yeah, follow you on X. That's right. Thought I'd set you up there to follow you on another social, but no, do not do that, Harry. No, follow Matt on X there. Thank you very much. Louis, where can people follow you on social media?
On my handle currently on the screen on X as well, Louis Van.
Good stuff, thank you. And Cam as well, plug your socials and your new YouTube channel.
Yeah, Max, I know in the blue box there, THFC_Cam, you can follow me there on Twitter. Yeah, my new YouTube channel is called Cam Talks Football. I plan to have content out this week, 1 or 2 videos, planned depending on when I edit it and if I can be bothered to edit the second one. But yeah, you can follow me there. My YouTube channel will probably be in my X bio or somewhere on my Twitter page.
Great stuff, Cam. Wish you all the best with that. Again, if I can help, please do let me know. Thank you very much to everyone. A big thanks to my panel. Hope you enjoyed this one. Until next time, thank you.